Imagine handing over your credit cards for a dream wedding, only to get locked out of your own home by your fiancée and her sisters, right before the big day. For Andrei, that betrayal led to a $250,000 nightmare, and his stunning revenge unfolded live at the reception.
Thanks for having me, Eliza. This story shows how I turned pain into power, and I'm grateful to share it. It's a lesson in standing up for yourself when love turns toxic. At 41, I thought I had learned enough about life to recognize real love when it walked through my door. My name is Andrei, and I'm the son of Romanian immigrants who came to America with nothing but determination and the belief that family is everything. They built a life here through sheer will, and I inherited that same drive. By the time I met Chloe, I had turned a small logistics company into a multi-million-dollar operation, owned my house outright in one of Chicago's most desirable suburbs, and had enough in the bank to feel secure about the future. I still remember the day Chloe walked into my office. She was there representing a marketing firm that wanted to handle our advertising, but from the moment she stepped through that door, business was the last thing on my mind. Her blonde hair caught the afternoon light streaming through my office windows, and when she smiled, it felt like the room got brighter. She was 28, vibrant, and had this infectious laugh that made me forget I was supposed to be the serious businessman with dark brown hair slicked back and brown eyes that had seen too many boardroom battles. "Mr. Popescu," she said, extending her hand with confidence that impressed me immediately. "I'm Chloe Martinez, and I'm here to revolutionize how your company connects with clients." 6 months later, I was down on one knee in the same office where we met, presenting her with a 3-carat diamond ring that cost more than most people's cars. When she said yes through tears of what I believed was pure joy, I felt like I had finally found the missing piece of my life. My parents had always told me that success meant nothing without someone to share it with, and in Chloe, I thought I had found my partner for life. The engagement period was a whirlwind of planning and excitement. Chloe moved into my house, a sprawling colonial with a circular driveway and enough space for the large family we talked about having. She brought her sisters into our lives, and I welcomed them with open arms. Brianna, 26, was a social media influencer with perfectly curated Instagram posts and an opinion about everything. Madison, 24, worked in fashion and had an eye for luxury that I initially found charming. They were Chloe's best friends and confidants, and she made it clear that accepting them was part of accepting her. "We're a package deal," she told me with a laugh during one of our early dinners together. The Martinez sisters stick together through everything. I admired that loyalty. My own family was small, just my parents and me, and the idea of having sisters-in-law who were so close to my future wife seemed like a blessing. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, and they seemed to offer exactly that. When it came time to plan the wedding, I made a decision that I thought demonstrated my commitment to our future together. I handed Chloe my credit cards, all of them, and told her to plan the wedding of her dreams. "I'm serious," I said, sitting across from her at our kitchen table with the morning sun streaming through the windows. "Money is no object. This is our one chance to celebrate the beginning of our life together, and I want it to be perfect for you." Her eyes lit up in a way that made my chest tight with happiness. "Really, you mean that?" "Every word. You have my complete trust." Looking back now, those might have been the most expensive words I ever spoke. What started as generous quickly became concerning, then alarming, then downright frightening. The initial budget we discussed was $100,000, already more than most people spend on weddings, but I could afford it, and I wanted Chloe to have everything she desired. Within 2 weeks, that number had doubled. "The venue Chloe really wants has a marble staircase and crystal chandeliers," Brianna explained to me over dinner, her voice taking on that tone people use when they're about to ask for something unreasonable. "It's $50,000 just for the space, but Andrei, you should see the photos. It's like something out of a fairy tale." I looked at Chloe, who was nodding enthusiastically. "It really is perfect, baby, and we'll only do this once, right?" The rational part of my brain, the part that had built my business by making smart financial decisions, was sending up red flags, but the part of me that was desperately in love overruled it. "If that's what makes you happy, then book it." The charges started appearing on my credit card statements like a flood. $15,000 for a dress that Chloe absolutely had to have from a designer in New York. $8,000 for Madison's bridesmaid dress because she's the maid of honor and needs to look special. Another $12,000 for Brianna's dress because we can't have her feeling left out. Then came the flowers, $25,000 for arrangements that would die within a week. The photographer cost $18,000, plus another $5,000 for the videographer who would capture every magical moment. The cake was $7,000, and when I questioned whether we really needed gold leaf on fondant that people would eat in 30 seconds, Chloe looked at me like I had suggested serving gas station cupcakes. "Are you saying I'm not worth it?" she asked, her voice taking on a wounded tone that made me feel like the villain in our story. "Of course not," I said quickly. "I just want to make sure we're being reasonable." "Reasonable?" Madison chimed in from across the room. "Andrei, this is Chloe's wedding day, the most important day of her life. Are you really going to nickel and dime her happiness?" That became their favorite phrase. "Are you going to nickel and dime her happiness?" Every time I questioned a charge, every time I suggested maybe we were going overboard, one of them would deploy that line like a weapon. And it worked, because the last thing I wanted was to be the groom who ruined his bride's dream wedding over money. The guest list ballooned from the intimate gathering of 50. We originally planned to over 200 people. "Chloe has so many friends who would be devastated if they weren't included," Brianna explained. More guests meant a bigger venue, more flowers, more food, more everything. The catering bill alone hit $60,000 for truffle-infused appetizers, Wagyu beef, and champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. Then came the emergency expenses. Madison needed a spa weekend to de-stress before the wedding, $3,000 at a resort in Wisconsin. Brianna required a new wardrobe for the engagement party, bridal shower, and bachelorette party because she couldn't be photographed in the same outfit twice, another $4,000. Chloe needed a second dress for the reception because the ceremony dress is too formal for dancing, $8,000 more. My credit card alerts had become a constant source of anxiety. Every ping of my phone brought news of another $1,000 charge, another essential purchase that somehow hadn't been essential the day before. When I tried to talk to Chloe about it, she would get teary-eyed and tell me I was stressing her out during what was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. "I thought you wanted me to be happy," she would say, and I would feel like the worst fiancé in the world. The worst part was how they talked about the money. Not our money, not even my money, just money, as if it materialized from thin air. They would sit around our kitchen table with their laptops and credit cards, planning and purchasing like they were spending Monopoly money. When I walked into the room, their conversations would stop, and they would look at me with expressions that ranged from mildly annoyed to openly hostile. "We're just finalizing some details," Chloe would say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." But I was worrying. The total was approaching $250,000, and we still had a week to go. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, the way they whispered when I entered a room, the way Chloe had become increasingly distant, the way Brianna and Madison looked at me like I was an inconvenience rather than the groom. But I was so focused on trying to be supportive, so determined not to be the controlling fiancé who ruined everything, that I missed the obvious preparation for what was about to happen. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier during our final tasting at the venue. I had questioned politely, I thought, whether we really needed the gold leaf garnish on the wedding cake that would add another $2,000 to our already astronomical bill. Chloe had exploded, screaming that I was ruining everything and that a real man would want his bride to have the wedding of her dreams. Her sisters had rallied around her, calling me negative and unsupportive. That night, she had slept in the guest room, claiming she needed space to think. I had been in Detroit for 3 days, handling a logistics crisis with one of our biggest clients. It was the kind of problem that required my personal attention, and I had promised Chloe I would be back by Wednesday evening, 3 days before our Saturday wedding. But the crisis proved more complex than expected, and when my flights were delayed due to storms, I called to explain I wouldn't make it back until Friday. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was working to secure the income that was funding the increasingly expensive celebration of our love. The flight back to Chicago was delayed, then delayed again, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, it was nearly midnight on Friday. I was exhausted, stressed about the wedding logistics, and looking forward to nothing more than falling into bed next to my fiancé and maybe having a quiet conversation about how crazy the last few months had been. That's when I saw them, 3 large suitcases sitting on my perfectly manicured lawn like abandoned cargo. Next to them were several cardboard boxes, and as I got closer, I could see clothes spilling out of the top of one. My clothes, my books, my grandfather's pocket watch that had been sitting on my dresser. But what made my blood run cold was seeing my family's photo album, the one containing pictures of my Romanian grandparents, my parents' immigration documents, and memories from my childhood, carelessly tossed in a box with rain-soaked edges. Everything that made my house feel like home was sitting outside in the cool October air, treated like garbage. I stood there in the driveway for a long moment, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Then I noticed the note, taped to the handle of the largest suitcase with what looked like wedding invitation tape, cream-colored with little gold hearts. I pulled it off with shaking hands and held it up to the light from the street lamp. It was written in Chloe's elegant handwriting, the same script she had used to address our wedding invitations. Andrei, we need you to take some time away from the house to reflect on your actions and your recent negativity. A groom should be supportive, not a source of stress. The wedding is in less than 24 hours, and we can't have you bringing this energy into our special day. We will see you at the altar. Don't ruin this for me. See. I read it 3 times before the words sank in, then I walked to my front door and tried my key. It didn't work. I tried it again, thinking maybe I was just tired and not turning it properly. Nothing. They had changed the locks on my own house. I stood on the porch of the home I had worked 15 years to buy, holding a note that told me to reflect on my actions, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. The love I had felt for Chloe, the excitement about our future, the hope that had carried me through months of increasingly concerning behavior, all of it crystallized into perfect, sharp clarity. They didn't see a partner, they didn't see a husband. They saw a credit card with legs and a house with a bank account attached. The wedding wasn't a celebration of our love, it was the culmination of an elaborate con game, and I had been the mark from day one. I pulled out my phone and called the Marriott downtown. I need a room for the night, I told the desk clerk. Actually, make it a suite, I have some work to do. As I loaded my belongings into my car, carefully protecting my damaged family photos, I thought about Chloe's note. She wanted me to reflect on my actions, so I did. My action had been trusting the wrong people. My action had been mistaking manipulation for love. My action had been funding my own humiliation. But my next action, that was going to be very different. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the Marriott suite with my laptop, my phone, and a legal pad, planning what would become the most expensive and satisfying revenge in wedding history. The first call I made was to Marcus Chen, my attorney and one of the few people who had never been impressed by Chloe's charm. Andrei, it's 3 in the morning. Please tell me you're not in jail. Marcus, I need you to meet me for breakfast and bring contracts, lots of contracts. What happened? I told him everything, the escalating costs, the changed locks, the note, the way they had carelessly discarded my family's precious photos in the rain. When I finished, there was a long pause. Jesus Christ, Andrei, they locked you out of your own house. They did, and Marcus, I want you to help me give them exactly what they deserve. I'm listening. They want their dream wedding, they're going to get it. Every single dollar they've spent, every ridiculous expense, every luxury they've charged to my cards, I want them to have all of it, and then I want them to pay for it. We met at 6 a.m. at a diner near Marcus's office. He brought his laptop and a briefcase full of legal documents, and I brought my credit card statements and a burning desire for justice. The numbers were even worse than I thought. The final tally was $252,841.52, not including the charges that were probably still coming in. Here's what we're going to do, Marcus said, spreading papers across the sticky diner table. We're not canceling anything. We're not stopping the wedding. We're going to let them have their party, and then we're going to make them pay for it. The legal strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Chloe and her sisters had committed fraud by using my credit cards without permission after I was no longer living in the house and had no access to my own financial information. They had engaged in identity theft by continuing to make charges after our relationship had effectively ended. And they had stolen my property by changing the locks and denying me access to my own home. But the beautiful part was the timing. If I acted before the wedding, they could claim it was all a misunderstanding, that they thought they still had permission to use the cards. If I waited until after the wedding, when they had enjoyed every moment of their stolen celebration, the intent to defraud would be crystal clear. We need someone on the inside, Marcus said, someone at the venue who can help us serve papers at exactly the right moment. I had been thinking the same thing. The catering manager, I've been dealing with him directly because Chloe kept changing the menu. He's not exactly thrilled with her behavior. David Kozlov ran the catering operation at the Fairmont Estate, the venue with the marble staircase that had cost $50,000 just to book. He was a professional who took pride in his work, and Chloe had treated him like hired help. She had screamed at him about the placement of the champagne fountain, demanded he fire a server because she didn't like her makeup, and changed the menu 6 times in the last 2 weeks. Through my prior business relationship with the venue's management company, they used my logistics services for their events. I had maintained access to their security system for coordination purposes. When I called him that morning, he answered on the first ring. Mr. Popescu, I was hoping to hear from you. We have some last-minute changes from Ms. Martinez about the seating arrangement, and frankly, sir, I'm at my wit's end. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that I'm completely serious. How would you feel about serving something other than dinner at tonight's reception? I explained the situation, and there was a long pause. Then David started laughing, not a polite chuckle, but a deep, genuine laugh that went on for almost 30 seconds. Mr. Popescu, in 20 years of catering, I have never wanted to serve papers instead of appetizers, but for this wedding, it would be my absolute pleasure. Marcus drafted the documents while I coordinated with David. The lawsuits were works of art, detailed, comprehensive, and devastating. Chloe would be served with papers demanding immediate repayment of the entire wedding cost, plus damages for emotional distress, fraud, and theft. Her father, who had co-signed some of the vendor contracts, would get his own lawsuit for conspiracy to commit fraud. Brianna and Madison would each receive itemized bills for every dress, spa treatment, and luxury item they had charged to my cards, along with demands for immediate payment. But the centerpiece was the eviction notice. Since Chloe was no longer my fiancée and had never been on the deed to my house, she was legally a trespasser. The notice gave her 72 hours to vacate the premises and return all of my property. The timing has to be perfect, Marcus explained as we finalized the documents. We serve them during the toasts when everyone is watching, when they're at their most vulnerable and exposed, and David's agreed to display all the evidence on the venue's screens during the serving. What about the guests? I asked. A lot of them are my friends and colleagues. That's the beauty of it. They'll see exactly what kind of people they're celebrating, and they'll understand why you're not there. David had arranged for his entire serving staff to be in on the plan. Instead of the main course, they would serve justice. Instead of wedding cake, they would deliver legal consequences. The venue's sound system and large screens would ensure that every word of the legal proceedings and every piece of evidence would be heard and seen by all 200 guests. As Saturday afternoon approached, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was in control. They wanted their dream wedding, they were going to get it, and then they were going to pay for every single moment of it. I spent Saturday in my hotel suite, tracking the progress of my former wedding like a general monitoring a battlefield. Through the venue's security cameras, access I maintained through my business relationship with their management company, and my phone buzzing with updates from Marcus, who was stationed nearby with a team of process servers dressed as catering staff, I watched the elaborate charade unfold. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, with cocktails at 5 and dinner at 7. At 3:45, I watched Chloe descend that $50,000 marble staircase in her $15,000 dress, looking every inch the radiant bride. Her sisters flanked her in their designer gowns, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been regret. Then I remembered the note, "Reflect on your actions." The ceremony itself was a production worthy of Broadway. White doves were released at the end, a last-minute addition that had cost $3,000. The photographer captured every moment with the dedication of someone documenting history. The videographer followed Chloe's every move like she was a celebrity. 200 guests filled the elegant space, many of them mutual friends and business colleagues who had no idea they were witnessing the most expensive fraud in Chicago's social history. During cocktail hour, I watched the guests mingle and admire the $25,000 floral arrangements. Chloe worked the room like a politician, accepting congratulations and compliments on the perfect wedding. Brianna and Madison flanked her, basking in the reflected glory of an event they had helped orchestrate and that I had unknowingly funded. The irony was perfect. They were celebrating a marriage that had already ended, toasting a love that had been revealed as pure greed. At 6:30, David sent me a text, "Showtime in 30 minutes. Are you sure about this?" I looked at myself in the hotel room mirror. My dark brown hair was perfectly styled. My brown eyes were clear and determined. I was wearing the tuxedo I had planned to wear as a groom, but now I was wearing it as a prosecutor. "Do it," I texted back. At exactly 7 o'clock, as the guests took their seats for dinner, the real show began. The first course was served without incident, a delicate butternut squash soup that had cost $40 per bowl. The guests chatted and laughed, completely unaware of what was coming. Chloe sat at the head table, radiant in her happiness, occasionally glancing at the empty chair that should have held her groom. At 7:30, Chloe's father stood to give the first toast. Robert Martinez was a good man who had been swept up in his daughter's wedding fever, and I actually felt sorry for what was about to happen to him. but he had co-signed contracts, and in the eyes of the law, that made him complicit. "Friends and family," he began, his voice carrying across the elegant ballroom. "We gather tonight to celebrate the union of my daughter Chloe and her husband Andrei, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight due to a business emergency." That was the story they had crafted to explain my absence. A business emergency, not the fact that they had locked me out of my own house and stolen $250,000. "But Andrei's generosity and love have made this incredible celebration possible," Robert continued, raising his champagne glass. "To the happy couple and to the love that makes dreams come true." As the guests raised their glasses, David's team moved into action. They emerged from the kitchen carrying silver trays, but instead of the seared duck breast with truffle reduction that was supposed to be the main course, they carried leather portfolios. Elegant, professional-looking documents that matched the formal tone of the evening. Simultaneously, the venue's large screens that had been displaying romantic photos of the happy couple flickered to life with something very different. Credit card statements, bank records, photos of my belongings scattered on the lawn, the note Chloe had left blown up in her own elegant handwriting for all to see. The first server approached Robert Martinez. "Sir, I have a delivery for you from the groom." Robert looked confused but accepted the portfolio with a smile. How thoughtful of Andrei to send something special. Similar scenes played out across the room. Brianna received her portfolio with a laugh. "Oh my God, what did Andrei do? He's so sweet." Madison practically bounced in her seat. "Is it our wedding gift? I told you he'd come through." But it was Chloe's delivery that was the masterpiece. David himself approached the bride's table, carrying a portfolio that was noticeably thicker than the others. The entire room was watching now, curious about this unexpected addition to the evening's program, their eyes moving between the servers and the damning evidence playing on the screens. "Mrs. Martinez," David said formally, using her married name for the first and last time, "the groom asked me to deliver this personally. He calls it your wedding gift." Chloe beamed as she accepted the portfolio. "He's so dramatic, I can't wait to see what surprise he's planned." She opened it with the confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for her actions. Her smile lasted exactly 3 seconds, then it froze, then it melted into an expression of pure horror as she realized what she was reading, what everyone was seeing on the screens around the room. The room fell silent as Chloe's face went white. Her hands shook as she lifted the first document, a lawsuit demanding immediate repayment of $252,841.52, plus damages for fraud, emotional distress, and theft by deception. On the screens around the room, the evidence played like a horror movie. Itemized credit card statements showing every ridiculous expense, photos of my rain-damaged family photos carelessly discarded, and finally, the note in Chloe's own handwriting telling me to reflect on my actions. "What is this?" she whispered, but her voice carried in the sudden silence. Around the room, other guests were opening their own portfolios while staring in shock at the screens. Robert Martinez had gone pale as he read his lawsuit for conspiracy to commit fraud. Brianna was staring at an itemized bill for every dress, spa treatment, and luxury item she had charged to my cards. Madison was holding a demand for immediate payment that included interest and legal fees. But Chloe's portfolio contained the crown jewel, a formal eviction notice from the house she had locked me out of, giving her 72 hours to vacate the premises and return all of my property. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then Chloe let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, part animal wail of pure anguish. "This can't be happening," she said, her voice breaking. "This is my wedding day." David stepped forward, his voice professional and clear, amplified by the venue's sound system so every word reached every corner of the room. "Ma'am, these are legal documents served on behalf of Mr. Andrei Popescu. You and your family are being sued for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The total amount owed is $252,841.52, which represents the full cost of this wedding that was charged to Mr. Popescu's credit cards without his knowledge or consent after you illegally locked him out of his own home." The room erupted. Guests began talking all at once, some standing to get a better look, others pulling out their phones to record the chaos. The photographer, still thinking this was part of the evening's events, continued snapping pictures of Chloe's breakdown. You don't understand, Chloe screamed, standing so quickly that her chair fell backward. He gave me permission. He told me to plan the wedding of my dreams. Ma'am, David continued calmly, according to these documents, that permission was revoked when you changed the locks on his residence and denied him access to his own property. Any charges made after that point constitute fraud. Brianna was crying now, clutching her own lawsuit. This is insane. Andrei loves us. We're family. Madison threw her portfolio on the floor. Where is he? Where is the coward hiding? That's when I decided to make my entrance. I had been watching the chaos unfold from the lobby of the venue, and I knew it was time for the final act. I walked into the ballroom wearing my tuxedo, my dark hair perfectly styled, my brown eyes calm and determined. The room fell silent as I appeared, and every eye turned to me. I looked good, I looked composed. I looked like a man who had just won the most important battle of his life. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice carrying easily across the stunned room. "I apologize for being late to my own wedding reception." Chloe stared at me like I was a ghost. "Andrei, what is this? What are you doing?" I walked slowly toward the head table, noting how the guests parted before me like I was royalty. These were people who knew me, who had seen me build my business from nothing, who respected me, and now they were seeing exactly what kind of person I had almost married. "You asked me to reflect on my actions, Chloe," I said, stopping just a few feet from her table. "So I did. I reflected on the action of trusting you with my credit cards. I reflected on the action of believing you when you said you loved me. I reflected on the action of funding a $250,000 party for someone who locked me out of my own house and threw my family's precious memories in the rain like garbage." "But I do love you," she cried, tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup ruined. "This is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out." "Can we?" I asked, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Let me read you something. This is the note you left for me last night. We need you to take some time away from the house to reflect on your actions and your recent negativity. A groom should be supportive, not a source of stress. We will see you at the altar. Don't ruin this for me." I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many guests as possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," that note was taped to my luggage, which I found on my front lawn after returning from a business trip. My belongings had been thrown out of my own house, and the locks had been changed. All because I had the audacity to question whether we really needed gold leaf on our wedding cake. The murmur that ran through the crowd was like a wave of understanding. These were intelligent people, and they could do the math. They could see the manipulation, the entitlement, the sheer audacity of what had been done. Robert Martinez stood up, his face ashen. "Andrei, I had no idea. Chloe told us you had agreed to everything." "Mr. Martinez, you're a good man who got caught up in your daughter's schemes," I said, "but you co-signed contracts for vendors, which makes you legally responsible. I'm sorry it has to be this way." Brianna was sobbing now. "We thought you wanted us to be happy. We thought you were being generous." "Generous?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You thought it was generous when you changed the locks on my house. You thought it was generous when you threw my belongings on the lawn. You thought it was generous when you told me I was bringing negative energy to my own wedding." Madison tried a different approach. "Andrei, we're family now. Family forgives each other. We can pay you back." "With what money?" I asked. "Brianna, you're an influencer with 12,000 followers and no real income. Madison, you work retail at a boutique. Chloe, you make $40,000 a year in marketing. Even if you all worked for free for the next 5 years, you couldn't pay back what you've stolen from me." The room was dead silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped working to watch the drama unfold. The photographer was still taking pictures, though I doubted these were the wedding photos Chloe had dreamed of. "But here's the thing," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "This isn't really about the money. This is about respect. This is about honesty. This is about the fact that you saw me as nothing more than a credit card with legs. You never loved me, Chloe. You loved what I could buy you." Chloe was hyperventilating now, her perfect makeup ruined by tears. "That's not true. I do love you. We can start over. We can have a small wedding, just us, no expenses." "Start over?" I shook my head. "Chloe, you threw away the best thing that ever happened to you because you couldn't resist the temptation to take more than you deserved. You had a man who loved you, who would have given you anything within reason, who wanted to build a life with you, and you threw it all away for a party." I looked around the room one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. I know this isn't the celebration you expected, but I hope you've learned something valuable. I know I have." I turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at Chloe. "Oh, and Chloe, you have 72 hours to get your things out of my house. After that, anything you leave behind becomes my property. I suggest you start packing." As I walked toward the exit, the room erupted behind me. Chloe was screaming, her sisters were crying, and the guests were talking all at once. But I didn't look back. I had said everything I needed to say. The legal proceedings moved quickly. With Marcus's help, we had built an airtight case that left no room for negotiation. Chloe and her sisters had committed multiple felonies, and the evidence was overwhelming. Every credit card charge, every changed lock, every vendor contract told the story of a calculated scheme to defraud me. Within a week, Chloe had moved out of my house. She left behind most of the expensive items she had bought with my money, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the luxury handbags. Legally, they belonged to me now, and I donated all of it to a women's shelter. I figured someone should get some good out of her selfishness. The financial settlements took longer to negotiate, but Marcus was relentless. Chloe's family eventually agreed to a payment plan that would take them 15 years to complete. They would be paying for their dream wedding until they were middle-aged. Brianna and Madison each faced their own lawsuits and payment plans. The total amount, with interest and legal fees, came to over $300,000. But the real justice wasn't financial, it was social. Word of what had happened spread through our social circle like wildfire. The wedding photographer, thinking he was being helpful, posted some of the pictures on social media before he understood what had really happened. Images of Chloe reading her lawsuit, of Brianna crying over her legal papers, of the chaos that erupted when the truth came out, they went viral. The video footage from guests' phones spread even faster. Within days, wedding justice was trending on social media, with millions of people sharing the story and commenting on the spectacular downfall. The contrast between the fairy tale wedding and the legal reality made for perfect viral content. Chloe's reputation was destroyed. Her marketing career ended when her employer saw the news stories about the fraud charges. Brianna lost most of her social media followers when the story broke, and Madison was fired from her boutique job when her employer learned about the theft charges. As for me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house felt like home again once Chloe's things were gone. I redecorated, removing all traces of her presence and reclaiming my space. My business continued to thrive, and I found myself appreciating the simple pleasure of financial security that couldn't be threatened by someone else's greed. 6 months later, I received a letter from Chloe. She was living with her parents, working at a coffee shop, and facing years of debt payments. The letter was full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. She claimed she had learned her lesson and wanted another chance. I read it once, then threw it away. Some lessons are too expensive to repeat. The most satisfying part of the whole experience was the realization that I had dodged a bullet. If I had married Chloe, I would have spent the rest of my life funding her increasingly expensive tastes while being treated like an ATM. The $250,000 wedding was cheap compared to what a lifetime of that behavior would have cost me. A year later, I met Sarah at a bookstore. She was a teacher, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and when I offered to pay for dinner on our first date, she insisted we split the check. When I told her about Chloe and I told her everything, she listened without judgment and then said something that made me fall in love with her on the spot. "She didn't deserve you," Sarah said simply, but I'm glad she was too stupid to realize it. We were married 2 years later in a small ceremony that cost $12,000 and was worth every penny. The difference was that this time, I was marrying someone who loved me for who I was, not what I could buy her. Our wedding was intimate, meaningful, and focused on what really mattered, the love between two people who respected each other. As for Chloe and her sisters, I heard through mutual friends that they eventually finished paying off their debt. Chloe never married, Brianna gave up her influencer dreams and got a real job, and Madison moved to another state to escape the scandal. They learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and that some people won't be taken advantage of forever. I kept one thing from that disastrous wedding, the note Chloe had left on my luggage. I framed it and hung it in my home office as a reminder of the most expensive and valuable lesson I ever learned. It reads, "Reflect on your actions." And every time I look at it, I smile because I did exactly that. I reflected on my actions, learned from them, and made sure I never repeated them. The $250,000 wedding was the best money I ever spent because it bought me something priceless, the knowledge of what real love looks like and what it doesn't. And that knowledge led me to Sarah, who was worth more than all of Chloe's designer dresses and luxury dreams combined. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. But sometimes, the best revenge is serving legal papers at a wedding reception while the evidence of their crimes plays on big screens for all to see. In my case, I got to do both, and the lesson I learned about true love was worth every penny of that expensive education. As I tell people who ask about my story, real love doesn't come with a price tag, and the people who truly care about you will never lock you out of your own life. The most important reflection isn't about your actions, it's about recognizing when someone else's actions show you exactly who they really are.
Andrei, thank you for bravely sharing your story of deception and redemption. It underscores how mistaking greed for love can cost everything, teaching us to spot true character before committing. Your justice served reminds everyone that real relationships are about mutual respect, not exploitation. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.